Bits, Bytes, and Banter. And today I'm joined by Carlos Paulino, who is country manager for Equinix in Portugal. Hello, Carlos.
Hello, Gary. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good morning, everybody, and I hope we can have some nice conversation around such an interesting topic.
Let's start off by talking about what we love to talk about in Ireland, which is the weather. So today is a beautiful spring day in Dublin. It's 15 degrees, the sun is shining, but you're going to gazump it by saying it's even better, right? In Portugal right now.
Well, it's Portugal, I cannot go otherwise. It's really sunny, and we are around 24 degrees. So really, I don't want you to make you jealous, but we could meet. We could make
Let,
next meeting live here.
there you go. But let's just dampen it slightly by saying, but it's very windy.
It's a little bit windy. That's true. That's true. Okay, so one
So
point.
we're an island in Ireland, as you know, and you have a very long coastline. And the only way that we can connect to from for voice, for data, for electricity, for all this type of stuff is by the utilization of subsea cables, the big backbone arteries of the internet age. Just for those that aren't overly familiar with the concept of subsea cables, what are they and why do they matter?
Well, the truth is, they are really the the main road that interconnects inter-regions, intercontinents, interlocations with enough bandwidth capacity to really serve the world. Basically, it's a optical way of transporting data. It's in the bottom of the ocean, interconnecting two locations. Mainly, the first cables were really from A to B. The truth nowadays is more and more they have branch units, so they are connecting in several locations. The truth is, normally people think that satellites are really the ones that can bring data from one side of the world to the other. But if we look at the numbers, approximately 99.4% of all the international data that is interchanged between continents are really going through subsea cables. To have an idea, all the capacity of satellites in the world can reach something like 50 terabytes and terabits. And when we talk about the subsea capacity, we are talking about 8,000, almost 9,000 now uh, terabytes. So they are really the like I said, they are the veins where the blood of the digital economy really gets from one side to the other.
So obviously back in 1850s, Ireland was one end of the first ever subsea cable that went from Valencia Island in our County Kerry to Canada. Um, but how many of them now are in, on, and around the world?
Well, for you to have an idea, since that early days of the first telegraphic lines that really just were able to transmit 10111 at a time, the truth is currently the world has more than 500 submarine systems, and take in consideration that we are not talking only about really close distances. We are talking about cables that sometimes can reach something like 20 to 25,000 kilometers. For instance, in Portugal, there are cables connecting directly from here, from Lisbon, directly to Sydney, or directly to Japan in Tokyo. So really large infrastructures that are what brings digital economy to what we know now.
And what does it, when I think of subsea cables, and I think of a cable that goes from Lisbon to Sydney. How big is it? Could I see it? And how deep are these? Are they in deep
Well,
terrain?
yeah, basically, people sometimes have that idea. Well, but do you lay it on the sea and they stay there like floating middle way down? The truth is, there are different types of structure on the cable. For you to have an idea, the less armor part, the thinner they are, it can be something like one finger. It's just like the dimension of one finger, not more than that. If you go in deep waters, the truth is, in deep waters you can reach depths of 10 kilometers easily without any major constraint. When it arrives to shallow waters near the continent edges, there, due to the shallow waters and to the risks that involve all the operations of fishing and anchoring there, you change to a different type of cable with a stronger armor, and he usually is buried in the seabed till it reaches the beach. And I don't want to get too technical, but the CLS, basically the cable landing station, so the end point, or the first end point on dry land for any cable.
So obviously, as you rightly said, the actual cable is the magic in the cable is the fiber that's right in the core of this cable, which is tiny. So the bulk of the cable is actually protection. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, like, or to give an idea to our audience, really the fiber inside is really like an air. It's really thin. In the beginning, well, subsea systems used to have two fiber pairs, four fiber pairs. Now you can see systems that are really reaching to dozens of fiber pairs in the same cable. This also translates immediately to the major increase in capacity and bandwidth the cables are able to transport. 10 years ago, yeah, approximately 10 years ago, 5 terabits design capacity was considered large. Now 300 terabits, it's common. It's completely normal cable. So the number of fiber pairs, the evolution on the technology, altogether, really were able to deliver the world with this huge bandwidth between all the major global points of interconnection
Is
in the
is
globe.
isn't it so interesting that I was lucky enough to be actually down in Valencia Island last summer when they celebrated the announcement that the UNESCO Heritage Site status for the landing station in Valencia was in the process of happening over the next number of years. And I was listening to one of the historians talking about the cable, to your point. So 150 years ago, it took 10 minutes to transfer a single word from North America to Europe. Um, he also went on then to say that there's a new cable by a company called Aguacoms, which was 300 terabits, which effectively meant that you could transfer all written media bookwise per second, every second of all books ever written, every second. To
Really,
give to,
exactly as you said.
to give a sense, because sometimes when we're talking, we talk terabits and teraflops and megawatts and all the rest. You may as well be talking about putting a man on the moon. The context for that just blew me away. 10 minutes, only 150 years ago, 10 minutes per word. Now you can take every word that was ever written every second. Um, and you probably in your world, which is as an interconnection company, are only seeing the requirements for not just the cables, but the bandwidth on the cables just going incrementally up, and up. Have you seen that particularly post COVID, that it hasn't gone back to levels pre-COVID? It's still up at the high levels of digitalization acceptance globally, right?
It didn't, Gary. It didn't at all. And no doubt humankind is eager for bandwidth. No doubt there. There are new players on the market on the subsea, and really we are seeing some shift on the type of capacity usage. So
Yeah.
basically, the content providers that something like 10 years ago were consuming something like less than 10% of the overall capacity now already overcame this 60%. So more than half of everything that goes into those cables are really content providers moving contents from location to location. And the truth is, we as humans are consuming more and more. So basically, it's a trend that I don't foresee any major deceleration in the near future. That's for sure.
We'll come back to the digitalization of the planet and the role these subsea cables play. But one question before we go away from the physical aspect of it on my mind is, why are they so heavily protected? What could potentially, and I know that the ocean and seas and 12,000 kilometers is a long way. So I'm sure what are the threats to these cables? Apart from great white sharks, which probably is just me throwing out something to be provocative.
Well, sharks always come to the conversation. That's for sure.
Okay.
The truth is, yeah, absolutely. That's general.
Why would a shark with an ocean full of meat want to eat a cable?
Well, the truth is, there are some. I don't know if scientific based, but the truth is, you know that on the cable, it doesn't go only the optics itself. Basically, from something like 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers um, away from shore, you need to regenerate the sign. You need to really amplify it. So basically, you have to put power on the cable. There is also power on the cable. Usually is DC power, and at 10,000 volts, more or less. There are different ranges, but the truth is that also create a magnetic field that uh, it can really attract sea creatures. So basically, I don't know if well, let's not blame sharks for everything that happened to the cables, but it's always a good fish to call to the conversation. The truth is, mainly the cables have problems being with subsea volcanoes, being with erosion on the seabed. Mainly, the major number of problems, it's really when you reach shallow waters. And
Okay.
there is now and for some time now, um, a commission to cable protection around the world, really to identify all the paths where you have a cable, and the protected areas where you cannot fish, or you cannot just drop the anchor of a ship there. It wasn't so advanced in the past. Now it's things are getting better, and I believe that's the main impact that you can have on a cable.
So you
Is real.
touched on it there, and it was probably my thought as well. Fishing trawlers and would obviously with large nets and stuff like that. Do they cause challenges, or is the natural erosion over time of the equipment usually the biggest challenge? The end of lifeness, if that's a word, of the kit.
Well, the major breaks that you have on subsea systems are really by human causes.
Okay.
So th- this tells it all. It's really activities, usually, like I said, near the continental edges, where the cables are really more close to the surface of the water, and
Yeah.
where you can have more risks. And people think that cables are there and you don't need to look at them, so you just drop it in the end of the ocean, and that's it. The truth is, currently in the world, you have something like between 2 to 4 cables that break every week. So it's really not something so out of the blue. It happens. Of course, there are dozens of repairing ships, cable ships that are ready to go and repair the situation. But
Sure.
it's really something that
What you what
happens.
you
Life.
what you say reminds me of a comment I heard a commentator say recently, that he wasn't as concerned about artificial intelligence as some, due to having seen a life of natural stupidity from people.
Yep.
which which I guess is a nice link into the next concern we have now, particularly if you were to read some of the European um, red tops and the European commentating about the weaponization of these cables, as it were. That because we as a global society are so dependent now on digital services and availability of digital services, that some of the ships in the Atlantic, some of the submarines could be looking at these cables as a way of disrupting the West or disrupting the commerce between countries. Surely that's always been there, and it's not just since recent events in the Ukraine.
No doubt there. The truth is, well, cables have been there since more than 1 century. The risk always was always there. The truth is, the system itself, as it more systems are being developed, it creates resilience to the entire network itself. Um, Basically, of course, I know that conversation since we heard about the damage to the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yeah.
That conversation started around cables. Just to give the audience an idea, and let's keep ourselves in Europe. So talking about Europe, basically we have something like 17 cables crossing the Atlantic to connect us to America. We have something like 6 major cables connecting to the west coast of Africa. We have more, approximately 11 cables to the north of Africa. We have 13 cables to the Middle East. So basically, if you attack one of them, imagine. I will not speculate about sabotage. No, that's not that's not the point itself. But imagine that for some reason someone tried to disrupt one of these cables. The truth is there are so many and in so many directions that the network simply just readjust by itself. And the truth is, like I said, you can have like 2, 3, 4 breaks on cables worldwide per week, and the common user doesn't feel the difference. So I think
So, so
it's
what
a,
you're
it's
saying, what you're saying is that the over the years, the diversity, the resilience, the self healing of the network is such that you'd nearly want to take out simultaneously all the cables, nearly, to have any
well,
meaningful effect.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. The truth is, basically the subsea network it's irreplaceable. So I already spoke about satellites, and we already saw how few they represent on the global bandwidth. Some people sometimes ask, okay, what about terrestrial fibers? Well, the truth is, they are far from being enough for what the world needs.
Right.
And if we look at Europe, all the terrestrial fibers really goes on the east direction. So most of them really cross Russia. So when we talk about all these events and this terrible war that we are facing, probably it's not a good path also to think as the resilience of itself by itself. the cables itself, the number, like I told you, is really so expressive that it's
Yeah.
cutting off Europe from the rest of the world would not be a simple task. That's for
But
sure.
I guess also those who understand these things often tell me that cutting a physical cable is one thing to create certain amount of disruption, but you'd be far more effective should you be that way inclined, just getting a whole nation state of hackers to wipe out a platform for a period of time than breaking a cable. A bit like palisade fences around data centers. You're not. It's really there as a deterrent. You're not really expecting somebody to drive a truck through it because you'll only do a nominal amount of disruption. Far easier to get a hacker to go in and cause major disruption. Is that really, it's great for the papers, it's great for the tangibility to talk about breaking, cutting, and disrupting cables, but there's far more devious stuff going on online in parallel that cause so much more inconvenience. Is that fair?
Absolutely fair, Gary. I really believe there are dozens of ways of creating a tremendous greater impact on the global digital infrastructure than going after the subsea cables. The truth is, and I would like also to express this idea that Europe is really a hub, that it's interconnected so in all the directions I told you. So basically, imagine 90 almost 97% of all the interregional traffic from Africa is direct to Europe. So basically, you would not be able to really target a
Yeah.
particular region on the globe or a particular country on the globe. Anything you can do, it will have impact on all and on both sides of any content that can arise. Same
What,
thing
what,
applies to Middle East, applies to North America. So it's really all the ecosystem that that can be impact, and with a limited impact, if I should say.
we have a question in from great name, by the way, Grandmaster UV. I hope that doesn't mean something terrible, but intelligence agencies would love to link into these cables covertly. So let's talk about that for a second. You
Yeah.
know, how can one do that? Well, it's not exactly like trying to take a person's credit card details with a scanner in your pocket. Have you anything to say about sort of how hard or likely or unlikely it is to tap into these cables?
Well, the truth is, even 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 if it's possible, it makes sense really to tap into. It would make sense to tap into the cables on the terrestrial part.
Yeah.
It's far more easier, no doubt about it. There is a second point on this. Well, the question is very interesting. Thank you so much, Grandmaster UV. But the truth is, there is also a very interesting discussion going on. I don't know if you heard about smart cables. So basically, are cables that include sensors all along the way that are able to detect earthquakes, tsunamis, and really give early warning to the populations nearby, and really help humankind to avoid tragedies as we have seen. Of course, every good plan of the humankind always can be used on the other side. So basically, they are also able to detect the submarines that are going by, to
Hmm.
detect ships that are on crossing that particular area. So I couldn't agree more that intel agencies, of course, would love to have that capacity. The technology really allows, being by installing this type of sensors, being by, well, tap into the cable. It's quite a difficult task.
Again,
It's really.
again, does it go back to the physical hardware, the physicality of it makes it hard to do that without being detected very quickly? Whereas, digital infrastructure with the right deviant mindset can hack things if you've got enough power and time. So you'd imagine there's an awful lot easier ways than tapping into the physical cable, right?
Yeah, no doubt there, no doubt there. And the truth is, the security of the physical mean, all the physical cable itself, it's an optic cable. Per se, it's already quite difficult to really tap or going there, because anything you may do, it will cut it. So basically, it will disrupt it. Usually these cables come directly to facilities with high security standards. I'm talking from,
Oh,
of course, from Equinix. 12 The 12 cables that land in Portugal come directly here to this IBX, where we have, of course, all the high standards in security that can protect the way the location where it could be easier, basically, to tap. After
isn't
all the equipment.
isn't it really interesting? So these are the backbone of the digital age. Let's call it, if it was a body, these are the arteries. The terrestrial cables are more the veins, and then the Wi-Fi is the capillary to your device. But an awful lot of attention and an awful lot of media talk about what they call low orbital satellites, that
Yep.
the likes of the billionaires of the planet are thrown up into the air by their thousands to cover spaces of Africa, Asia, etc. Is that just augmenting the,
Um,
or over time will they lower? Well, what is a low orbital satellite to start with, and what role do they play in this bandwidth intensive world that we're just discussing?
okay, so basically, all these new constellations that are bringing to low orbit, they serve, and the major advantage that we really, as humans, can get from one of those systems, it's really the coverage. So
Oh,
basically, you can have internet, large, well, with larger bandwidth in the middle of the ocean. You can have it in the middle of the desert. You can really cover the globe. And imagine, for instance, for emergency calls, for lots of locations that were completely disconnected from net. These new systems are really able to do so. So they are extremely welcome. The latency it's quite interesting, because before, when we talk about stationary satellites, geostationary satellites, the latency makes it almost impossible to really use on what the world needs on most of the workloads. That is almost real time. On these
okay.
ones, the latency is quite interesting. By the other side, the bandwidth itself is still far from being uh, um, somehow competing with any submarine cable. I believe both systems will complement in a perfect way. So basically, you will have really huge trunks of subsea cables interconnecting main terrestrial stations for these constellations that would bring the information up. Uh,
Oh,
I
I get that.
so
So there,
complementary.
so again, and it's great to understand this. Obviously, all of the low orbital satellites have to have a grounding station, which in turn is connected to the heavy bandwidth
Yeah,
fiber cables. So it's really just another last mile with a different name on it in one respect,
yeah.
which is very interesting. So, Carlos, we're coming to the half of the hour. We've 2 minutes to wrap up. Um, it's been really interesting because it's just, even though I work on the industry, it's great to talk to someone who actually knows the origin of it and the why. What have we not covered that you'd like to tell people about subsea cables? They're about as well understood or less understood than data centers, and that's saying something. So, what is it you'd like to say to people in the final 50 seconds of the show?
Well, we already really brought the idea of how important these infrastructures are. The truth is, from our side, and well, also as Equinix, building the capacity so on the continental edges to really receive them and be able to accelerate deployments. be able to really create all the conditions for these cables to land directly on a neutral facility to interconnect to with all the rest of the ecosystem. I should say that we will see quite an interesting next years over the Atlantic, mainly I believe on the South Atlantic. The growth is really getting to the so desirable two digits on the on in Africa. So basically, I believe that Ireland, Portugal, being on this vertical, on this geography, are in a fantastic position to really help serving on Africa digital development. And I would like really to, well, throw the challenge of having more uh, close proximity between countries and more regulation that can really help these new projects to deploy and serve us all in the best way possible.
Well, it's been sharp and short, but very interesting. I'd summarize by saying that if the digital ecosystem was a body, that these cables are your arteries. You don't often see them, thank God, from an artery on your body. They rarely burst and bleed all over the place, thank God, from your body. And with that, we leave it. Thank you so much, Carlos. It's been really educational. Thank you for your wonderful handling of English because my Portuguese is zero. And until the next time on Bits, Bytes, and Banter, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.